Thank you so much. I'm getting used to these fancy microphones. So for those who don't know me, actually, where's our little clicker? Is it over here? I'm in the real estate sales business. I own a brokerage in Toronto. I do not build homes. I mean, the few times I've actually considered doing it, I looked at all of the roadblocks and barriers and thought, oh my God, I'm going to be like Sisyphus for the next 2 years, pushing the boulder up the hill, making 3 steps up, getting pushed back 2 steps, and doing this. And I thought, you know what, this is just too much work. So a lot of credit and respect to everyone who's building housing, because I appreciate it's a very big challenge with everything that's going on in this city. So today I'm going to chat a little bit about, is there a little clicker? No, this is
the arrows on the side.
Oh, this way. There we go. I'm going to chat a little bit about population growth and the impact on housing, because I feel like Ben Rabideau, who spoke earlier, wasn't sufficiently bearish enough on this issue. And I think it's important to be a little bit bearish, because not because I'm a pessimist, I'm an optimist. I'm just a very risk-averse stoic. And when you're a very risk-averse stoic, you have to think about your potential worst-case scenarios, and I think plan for them, and potentially think what happens if that plays out. So this is what chat's really about, because I do think we're not really grasping the full depth of what's going on. So as Ben mentioned, the Feds had talked about making massive changes to Canada's population growth. We've been growing by 1.2 to 1.3 million people per year. It's easy to have a booming housing market when you're growing by 1.3 million people per year and you're only building 200,000 homes. Prices are surging, rents are surging. You don't need a PhD to figure out that math. But based on their projections, the next 2 years in red, our population growth is going to actually be negative 80,000 people per year. How will the growth go from 1.3 million people to negative 80? You know, we still have immigration of 390,000 people per year, sure, but this chart from BMO Economics shows our immigration, permanent immigration in the gray, and that's going to be in the 300 plus thousand, but the non-permanent residents will be negative. More permanent residents will be leaving than are entering, so we're going to be shrinking the permanent resident numbers by, say, 500,000 people per year. We're bringing in 390,000 new permanent residents, so our growth is actually going to be negative for 2 years. And that's not a small detail. I mean, the federal government, the other side to this, the federal government seems to think, and I think this is overly optimistic, that housing completions are going to reach effectively record highs. We might obviously going to have some strong completions the next year or two. I think starts are going to be kind of obviously scaling back over the next little bit. But I think our biggest concern is going to be, what does the next couple of years look like? And if we look at what's under construction, and we'll look at Ontario specifically because we're all in Ontario, if we look at what is under construction today, we have about 70,000 condos, maybe 18,000 rentals, and about 12,000-ish or so homeowner properties. So those are low-rise homes. And I think this really really set the stage for what we might expect over the next 2 years. I think it's very, very possible that the low-rise market and the condo market and the rental market move in different directions. Because, even though we have negative population growth, as Ben mentioned, we still have 390,000 permanent residents that need housing. We're going to have 500,000 people, non-permanent residents leaving. Those tends to be renters. So it's not like the entire market's going to collapse overnight, but it's important to remember our growth's negative, but we're building 200 plus thousand homes for zero growth in demand effectively, right? So this is effectively eating into our housing shortage. This talk about the housing shortage we have in Canada is baked into today's prices and rents. But if you go 2 years where your growth is negative 160,000 people and you're building 450,000 homes, what's going to happen? I mean, either prices are going to dip or rents will dip or both, right? And I suspect we're probably going to see more pressure on condos, condo prices potentially, more pressure on condo rents, and less so on low-rise homes, and largely because we're not building them. And when I say low-rise homes, I'll put an asterisk to that. I think the types of properties that Evan, who's just on before, was talking about that they're building that are technically condominiums, but are catered towards end user type demand, completely different. I think Matt was on here earlier talking about builders who are building family-sized condos in existing urban neighborhoods, completely different. That is not the sort of 70,000 that we're thinking about. The disproportionate number of 70,000 are small condos. They're rental condos. And if we look at even the stock right now, what is happening in the market, those are the sluggish housing units. So I think if you're building, I think, the type of condos that we were talking about earlier, the family-sized ones will probably do a little bit better because we just don't have a lot of family-sized housing or stock going on right now. People talked about, Brad was talking about earlier about multiplexes. The bigger trend right now, or one of the trends we're seeing, is not people building multiplexes, and certainly some are, but a lot of end users buying triplexes and converting them to single-family homes because we just don't have single-family homes. Right? So I think this is going to be one of the things we got to think about, how these two markets may actually move in slightly different directions over the next 2 years. And I think one important point, and I'm not going to chat too long, I thought I'd leave some time for Q&As, is that we have to think about our starting point. Meaning, where are we today? Are we starting in a market where we're unbelievably undersupplied and there's bidding wars? And the answer is not really. If we look at where we're at, we actually have a record level of active condo inventory. So this is the number of active listings for rent for the month of October, going back to 96, and we can see in red this year, we've never had more condo apartments available for sale, right? And we're going to have these interesting dynamics. We're probably going to see investors exiting, which is putting downward pressure on prices, but also a lot of listings that is putting downward pressure on rents. I suspect both will probably happen. So we have a record number of condo listings, and part of this is driven by a lot of completions this year. It's driven by high costs. Anyone who's an investor is trying to refinance, get a mortgage, the numbers aren't working well, rents are falling, and a general, I'd say, slight pessimism among investors because, most investors, condo investors, are small mom and pop investors. They were buying these things for the capital gain. Like many of them, if you did the math, were losing $700-800 a month because their rent wasn't covering their mortgage and their maintenance fees and their taxes. I mean, that's fine if your condo's going up $80,000 a year, but when your condo's not, and condo prices have been flat for 4 years. And this is putting pressure on the market, and this is why many are exiting. So we had a record number of condo listings for sale, and when we look at rentals, we're very close to a record. That huge spike is during COVID, which, if anyone remembers, everyone was just leaving the city. The rental market plummeted. I think rents went down, something like 25% in the span of a few months. Aside from that, we have, well over 80,000 units for rent right now. And the rental market is unbelievably soft. It's very, very slow. And we're starting to see rents turn over and it's trending quite down. And I think we're just kind of starting. And I think I would not be surprised. What we're seeing on the ground is just this trend continuing. The mom and pop investor, and this is condo rents, keep in mind, so most of these are smaller investors. They can't sit on them for 6 months and wait for someone to give them the price that they want. They're very sensitive to their carrying costs. So, maybe they were on the market for $2,400 a month, but they're slashing to $2,200 because they need to rent it, because they can't sit there and float it for another 6 months. And I think this is one of the most important parts for people who are looking at rental. And we're very aware of this. We started working recently with a builder who built a 45-unit, 6-story purpose-built rental in our neighborhood. We're in Leslieville, trying to get it rented, and looking at their pricing and the market pricing, and it's a challenging market for rentals right now. And I'd say, anyone who's thinking they're going to get $450 a square foot on their rental is probably 10% above market today, and maybe 10 or 15% above the market 2 years from now. In an environment where population is negative, and we're building, 200 plus thousand units per year in this country, it's going to be a very, very challenging market for the rental market, I'd say. And I think these are the things that I'd be mindful of, that there are different dynamics. We could see different things in the news, condo market plummeting, but it doesn't mean if you're building family-sized condos, you're going to be struggling as a builder because you're targeting a completely different segment of the market. Whereas small condos are going to be struggling, and I think the rental market probably in the Toronto area is going to kind of turn a corner right now and probably soften over the next year or so as population growth kind of cools down and the kind of completions come and complete over the next year or two. So that's all I had for today. I thought I'd keep some time for Q&As and chats if anyone had any questions.